it's me, Jay, your DM. I use he, him.
I'm, Jerika. I use she, her.
And I am probably Embers Tide, and I use he, him.
And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decision for the treasure of wisdom.
Not just for, but to retrieve.
I knew I said it wrong when I said it, but I wanted to stick the landing. It's fine.
The most important part.
Well, welcome one and all to another episode of Insight Check, where we're hanging around. We're just having a good time.
Thank you. I feel welcomed.
Yeah, if you hear a lot of noise, it's apparently cat tree hour over here at the J residence. So the cats are doing a lot of up and down motion. It's really loud.
Is there any kind of dominance display as part of this cat tree activity?
So yeah, whoever gets the top of the cat tree is generally considered, king of the hill.
The top dog?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
not dogs.
They wouldn't like
kings.
that.
The Lion King?
Yeah, right now we've got Peaches at the top. We've got Salmon, who is resting at the top of the other cat tree because they've decided on a truce. And then Latte is in the floor. Because I guess they have a very low opinion of themselves. I don't know.
Have you ever based a PC or NPC off of your cat?
Have I? Yes, a tabaxi. I had a tabaxi named Peaches once.
Oh,
Aww.
That's adorable.
Yeah. It was just hard for me to come up with a name, and I was like, oh, I have one right here.
Or
That's fine.
species.
Yeah. Speaking of characters, we wanted to focus our dungeon crawl today on the sort of a more niche subject, which was to look at characters we've played. And this came from Embers watching a stream of Amy Falcone.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know if it was a stream or a Q&A where Amy was talking about her Acquisitions Incorporated C-Team character, Walnut Dongrass, and a little bit because that character is such a distinct personality, such a strong and sometimes grating personality, entirely by design and by the skill of her RPing. Amy was talking about why she developed that character that way, which in part was what's the backstory, but was also, I think, in part for Amy, and this is my speculation, I'm going to set out to play this character with my friends in a game. There's going to be some sort of, I don't know, maybe therapeutic or meditative or discovery-like process as I play this character that's relevant to me, Amy, the person. And I was hearing this, again, paraphrasing it now, but in hearing it, I thought to myself, that is a really interesting insight on how I at least would design a character and think I know, and I would think that I knew what I was doing in doing so, in building that character a certain way. But then as I played them, it would often kind of evolve and change. And the art of playing and developing that character session after session would sort of take on its own life. And I would sit back and, after listening to this comment from Amy, I said to myself, that's a very cool way to look back on why I RP'd character A or character B the way that I did over the course of that arc or however long that we played. Maybe I thought I knew what I was doing. Maybe I thought I knew what the experience in RP was going to be like. But then as I got into the group dynamic, and that PC started to interact, it changed, it evolved, and the character kind of grew. So I thought that was a really cool perspective and perception from Amy, from the Amester.
I would say that it's interesting that Amy put these sort of negative qualities on Walnut that they didn't necessarily like in themselves. But it's a comedy game, so it's funny to have this character that is flawed because the flaws will make for the comedy. You'll enjoy those moments where they're being difficult or troublesome. That's funny. But at the same time, a lot of people identified with and liked Walnut because of these traits that are kind of grating, but they're also very real and people have them. There are petulant, stubborn people in all of our lives that we still love despite their flaws because of all the other things about them that are lovable. And, if you put these things you hate about yourself into a character and then you see that character like grow close with other people and develop bonds, it's a nice little reminder that, you know, like you also can grow close and develop bonds despite these things about you that you maybe don't like. But yeah, we thought we'd mention some characters that in the past that we've had that have gone through this sort of process of discovery. I have one very simple. I played a super religious robot man. It was a Warforged cleric, and he was a zealot, and everybody found him so fucking annoying. It was really, really funny because, like, I didn't design him to be annoying. I designed him based off people in my life that I knew. But when I played him, people got so irritated at this character because of their hard-nosed zealotry. And it
holding up a mirror to the subject, perhaps.
Yeah, and it was interesting for me because it was at a very interesting time in my life where I was, you know, learning a lot about how to interact with other people and kind of coming out of the social bubble of my childhood and going into a sort of a more adult circle. And I was through this character and through this like zealous righteousness and how obnoxious everyone found that, I was thinking, you know, maybe I'm a little self-righteous. Maybe I'm a little over the top on some of these things. And it was very the thing that really made it interesting for me, it was that because I've made obnoxious characters before and I did it on purpose, but I didn't do this one on purpose. And so it was like, oh, what is this about this character that I'm not seeing that everybody else is? What is it about this character that I'm doing that is actually bad and I didn't know it?
Yeah, that's such an interesting indication of how, you know, you perceive someone in a vacuum, just sort of by themselves, and then put that identity into a social group, and you know what happens will surprise
destructive.
You. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or it just doesn't work the way you thought it would.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I had this sort of idea of how the dynamic would be. I was like, oh, it'll be funny. He'll, you know, start some trouble because he's such an upright fellow, but everybody will come around to him because he is an upright fellow. But no, it was like, gosh, this guy's obnoxious. He's going to have to bend. Everybody else is not going to bend towards him. He's going to have to be the one that bends towards them, which was interesting.
Cool. In AD&D 2E, I was probably around 13 years old, give or take a couple of years. And I was...
Mini Embers.
Yes, mini Embers. I was deep in the throes of social anxiety and trying to understand what I was supposed to do with other peers, and I had no clue what I was doing. It was very stressful. It was very discombobulating for me. So I found myself playing Dungeons and Dragons in my friend's basement, which turns out to be an excellent choice looking back on it. But I had this motivation to create this like super tanky, righteous, front of the party, face of the party paladin character. And so I did. And my theory was I would sort of use that as an outlet to try and develop this presentation of confidence, authority, righteousness, not necessarily like a dogmatic righteousness, but more of like more of a righteousness that comes from intense self-confidence that I would then role play having. And I thought that would be cool. I thought that would show me like, you know, this is how you would talk in this kind of a social circumstance, because I would run through it in dry runs with my character. In the process of kind of doing that, I just consistently got our party into more and more and more convoluted problems. So like we had more encounters, we had fewer allies, we were able to put together like some resources and some people that would help us because we were able to be charismatic, but like just the off the cuff, shoot first, ask questions later confidence that I thought I saw in my real life like peer group turned out to be like super disruptive to developing friendships in the game, coming up with strategic alliances in the game, and ultimately being flexible and adaptive when, there were twists and turns in the plot. So that kind of confidence that I thought was easy to mimic and ideal as a character trait, like came back super problematic for this character in the party. And
so let's be real here. You tried to be a Chad and you ended up a Brad.
Wow.
And that's going to be the problem for you.
You're not going to have a good time. I tried to take this little learning out back out into the real world and like look at how some of these super confident like alpha types, and this is like a bunch of 13 to 15-year-olds, so big grain of salt. But at the time they seemed super cool, and I just kind of watched and I sort of saw the world that they had shrink as I started to take a different perspective on all this, how great this confidence thing must be. Like it turned out that they had far fewer kind of like social network connections than I thought they did. They were a little more insular than I thought they were. And this is not to generalize, but it just turned out that I was able to take a surprising experience in that PC and maybe lift the veil a little bit on what I thought was like the two cool cats maybe having their own challenges too.
Let me tell you about Moral.
Yes.
Moral is a turtle. She's probably like not middle-aged, but like 75% age.
Mm-hmm.
Like 3/4 of the way there.
Yeah, sure.
And she's a druid. But more importantly, she's a total weirdo. And I think she might sort of represent me like embracing weirdness and being
letting your
like,
freak flag fly.
Yeah, like done with being normal. So the context is I had just wrapped up like a 2.5-year game with Jerika. My first druid. She was Circle of the Moon, and we were sort of trying to like keep the spark alive with that specific group. And so we were doing different things, like doing shorter stories. We dipped our foot into Mouse Guard for a little while, and then this character was developed because one of the other players said, I'll run, this storyline for a couple sessions, but let's get the band back together and put all of our old PCs back in there.
Totally.
And I was like, well, I don't want to play Jerika. I want to play somebody else. So the DM was kind enough to let me come with a PC at the same level, but with different stats. So I just pushed it, I guess, the envelope, the limit, the edge, whatever you want to call it. So, and it's really not that weird. It's, it's a turtle druid. Like, no one's shocked. But she is Circle of the Spores. And this was the first time I played something besides Circle of the Moon. To just, I just wanted to, check it out, see how it goes. I didn't really develop a lot of backstory for Moral. There was more of a sort of a presence, and I think I had an idea going in that she would have like mushrooms on her shell that she cultivates and like carries around with her for food. But over the course of playing her, things got a little weird. Let me read for you 3 notes that are on my character sheet. Moral has a horn. So that's one of her, like an instrument she got. This note says, Moral plays Careless Whisper.
What?
I think that's like her like go-to horn tune.
Oh, that kind of horn.
Yeah. The next one says observes through sea glass. So at some point she got like a little sliver of sea glass, and like apparently she would hold it up like a monocle and just like pretend or try to convince people that she, saw the truth through the sea glass. And the last one says, Tressims are the ancient enemy. And I do remember this. So the character who became a non-player character for the purposes of this campaign was a wizard, and she had a pet Tressum that was kind of like the guide around where we were supposed to go. And they got into some sort of spat at the beginning, and I decided that Moral hates Tressums.
Hey, so what's a Tressum?
A Tressum is a cat with wings.
A what?
Like a cat with wings. You can get it as like a familiar if you want.
Dude, Jay, this is hard on your brand. You should know this.
A cat with wings.
Look it up. It's a D&D thing.
I'm impressed. I did not know.
I did not know you did not know.
Tressum.
Yes.
Interesting.
Tressim.
It sounds like an architectural feature.
It does, actually, for sure.
It's like we're going to build out the sunroom. We're going to put some tressums in here.
All right, so I'm looking at Tressums. Now, this might be an atypical Tressum, because I'm looking at this and I feel like you would have mentioned that Tressums have massive butterfly wings?
Yes, the wings are butterfly wings, and they're usually very, very colorful.
What?
Yeah.
What? These are like fairy cats?
Yes, very much so. And it was very on brand for this wizard who was like a little bit out there.
Okay, I found a Tressum with a more mundane set of wings here.
Is it like a pigeon Tressum?
Yeah.
Boo. No, I want the like rainbow I'm on an acid trip. Tressum. I think that's more of their normal flair.
These are the cats that Hunter S. Thompson saw in the desert.
Yeah, exactly.
What I found here, now you'll like this one. This is Tressum Garfield.
You're gonna like this cat with wings.
He's got a little
guarantee
orange kind of coloration going to him.
It's cute.
Is it eating lasagna?
Fairy style. I mean, the image is there in the Discord for you right now. Unlike our audience who has to hear all this without knowing what the heck we're talking about, discussing pictures is really bad in an audio medium.
I feel like Tressums, for me personally, is kind of like Almirage, where it's like a normal animal, but they like
put some wings on it. Yeah, fade up.
Yeah. About half these Tressums are bird wings and half are fairy wings. I wish they would just make a choice, you know?
Well, I would say that butterfly is what I know and love.
Yeah.
But over the course of playing Moral, she developed some very interesting personality traits. At inopportune moments, she would offer her fellow PCs mushrooms from her back. All of them thought they were trippy mushrooms. They were not. But the way she also had a very specific way of speaking. So, would you like some tea? And like the PCs, I think, were just creeped out by that. And so there was a lot of rumors developed from the other PCs, like, oh, that tea is totally bad tea or poison or something.
Right, that's the spiked tea.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
the Spirit Journey
she was really
tea.
fun to play, and I don't know, like just a total whack job, but in the best way. So she let my weirder side poke through a little bit.
And you know what? We're all gladder for it.
Yeah.
Because weird Jerika is the best Jerika.
Yeah. It's like the evolved Poke form.
Yeah. Jerika, weird Jerika. And then the final form is just like older weird Jerika.
Final form.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, we'll see someday. Now, let's move on from characters to a different kind of character.
The Nemesis.
Yeah. The Nemesis. I like that. I like that dramatic phrasing. We're going to talk about villains. So I have a question here. It's from RD&D. Well, first of all, I'm going to ask this dumb question first because I do find it funny.
Hit me with the dumb question.
The top question when you search villains on D&D, RD&D, very recent, 3 days ago,
yes,
was asked, How do villains do that?
I actually thought it was going to be something totally different. I thought it was going to be, how can I convert this Disney villain into an NPC villain character?
No, there is a clarification in the thread which says, I always hear about an antagonist trying to become a god, but how is that possible? Well, friend, through the power of imagination, anything is possible. You get to tell us how villain do that. You have to make the decision on your own. There's no rules.
You just have to fill out the proper IRS forms when you're ready and submit them in triplicate and make sure that they're notarized. And
so how
then
do
you'll get your
villains
God
do it?
certificate in 6 to 8 weeks.
Right. You have to take 20 levels in. Now, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but in order to become a god, you would think cleric, but that's not going to be it. You have to go sorcerer. Sorcerer is the only one that ends in godhood.
Right, because sorcerers have more protein, right?
Absolutely. They're packed with the proper vitamins and minerals that are going to get you godhood. It's just something funny about a sorcerer. When you go from level 19 to level 20, you're like, oh my gosh, big deal. I get 1 extra sorcery point. But when you go from 20 to 21, that's when you actually unlock divinity.
Right.
It's the special perk that only sorcerers get, and it's because they had all those good nutrients brewing away for 20 levels.
But look, you have to make sure that at level 16, you take the proper coursework and get your demigod learner's permit, because you need to log a certain number of hours doing god stuff before you're able to get your full god license.
The classic mistake I've seen, right? A young go-getter is on their way to godhood. They filed their forms in triplicate. They've, been eating the right minerals to make sure that they're accruing a certain
a lot of
kind
spinach,
of connective tissue.
You need that iron.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And they, at level 16, they started doing their internship at, Greater Gods Are Us. And like you think this is a promising demi-divine. They're going to really go places. They're going to go and then create places.
They've even updated their LinkedIn profile accordingly.
Wow. I mean, they're going above and beyond. But then here's the problem. They get to level 18. And what do they not do?
But the problem is then they go in and they bake at 350 for an hour, but they forget the baking soda. Most important part. To make your gods rise in the oven, you gotta use baking soda.
To make them apotheose, they need the baking soda.
Oh my God. It's the leavening agent. Yeah, well, definitely you want to get that rise. You got to start a following too, Well, here's the thing. You got to get social media. You got to get on your branding because you can't be a god without a following.
You got to get that Twitter check mark.
Exactly.
All the gods have them. All the gods.
Do you know how many gods there are who have a Twitter following under 1,000? None. None of them. Even the least likely, even Asmodeus, who is a total jerk, never even nice to his fans. Asmodeus has 1.5 million followers.
Wouldn't know, I blocked him.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right, well, I will give you credit, Jay. That was indeed a dumb question. But I can say that you and me surpassed the dumbness of that question with our commentary.
Here's a good question. How to make a lasting villain? And at first I thought, oh, wow, this is like a deep question about how to make a villain that's memorable and going to stick with your players. No. Hi, I'm planning a campaign and trying to figure out how to allow a villain to fight the players but survive to come back on multiple occasions. So what they're kind of after here is a sort of Gargamel situation where they can hurl this villain at the players repeatedly and then just constantly, get away.
Give the villain Misty Step and or teleportation and or running away tactics. That's the only way it happens.
The classic rule of JRPGs is all villains can teleport. It is a certain thing. When one day you're sitting at home and you can't teleport, and then you decide to do something evil and now you can teleport. And it's just one of the benefits. Misty Step is a great option to get short range. Dimension Door, 500 feet. You'd be surprised how much that can end a combat. How often that can just end a combat.
You do a little anime girl, evil girl giggle, wahahaha, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Definitely knowing when to bail on a combat is important. Like, the time to bail on a combat is not when you're at 13 HP. The time to bail on a combat is when you're at like 113 HP. Because your players can do a lot of damage very quickly.
But I also think that like minions are really important. So you
Yes,
say,
true.
oh, players? Well, I have these 2 giant stone friends for you. Bye!
Alternatively, you need to have something that the players want more than the villain. So it'd be like, you could stay and fight me, but there's a person in the other room who's about to fall into a pit of acid, and they're your mother. And it's like, oh,
Pet.
no, my mom.
No, your pet. Your pet's gonna be better bait.
Wait, which one of our mothers? All of them.
How many you got?
I'm
That's
your
right.
mother.
Yeah.
I was going to say the one person who's had this challenge thrust upon them, perhaps unwillingly, more times than anyone else I've seen publicly, is Matt Mercer with all of his one shots from Vox Machina. Because they come back for these one-shot escapades. They're all level 20 and absurdly jacked on legendary items. And he's got to make a villain that will last 2 hours, let's say.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Against, a team of 8 gods.
I actually did this last night. So my players are fighting this nation called Valestria, which is this huge country in my game world. And it's basically like the super warlike nations. It's the Klingons of my setting.
Ooh.
They have cloaking devices.
No. They all have the invisibility spell. That would actually be interesting, but no. They killed the younger heir to the throne, the younger prince. And so now the older prince is the only heir to the throne who's left. And so I wanted to introduce him as like a ongoing villain. So how did I have him survive an encounter with my players? I made him too strong for them to beat. He was level 14 fighter paladin multiclass, and they were level 9, I guess. So he had like 5 levels on them. And then he was surrounded with 6 champion fighters who all have 140 hit points.
I mean, you could do the Manchun route, which is
clones.
Oh, that was a clone the whole time. Didn't you know?
Yeah.
You killed me? Nah.
I have definitely pulled that before where they get the killing blow on an enemy and then they just crumble to snow.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it was actually a simulacrum.
So I guess some of the basics, like some of the basic groundwork is watch some telenovelas, read some old Silver Age Marvel comics, and or watch the 80s comic TV adaptations of like Spider-Man and whatnot. Just get into that soap opera-esque level of unkillable rascal villains.
You can't be afraid to ham it up a little bit in D&D. Like, this is a game that we play for fun. It doesn't need to be a super serious story. I mean, you can run it that way if you want, but like...
But like, if I walk into work and I start laughing like Skeletor, people are going to look at me weird.
Exactly.
Or they're going to be like, oh, it's Halloween, is it?
Oh, I should dress up as Skeletor.
So I actually, another thing that I did to really make them hate this guy is I actually called upon some of my life experience, which is to say an RPG I played a long time ago.
Is it called life experience?
Yes, exactly. My lives are many and varied and mostly in video games. So there's this guy called Luca Blight, which is like this villain in Suikoden. And it is one of the most hated villains in history because his first scene is him taking a prisoner and making them crawl around like a pig before he kills them. He tells them, crawl like a pig, oink. And the person does it and he kills them anyway. And then he makes fun of them after they're dead.
Whoa.
And it's like a scene where you like really think, man, this is a piece of shit. This is a real asshole. So I pulled that on this villain. I had him like take on a prisoner because he was trying to goad the players into fighting him. Because the players had a teleportation circle. So they ended last session by throwing a bomb down the hallway and collapsing the tunnel. And so there was this really cool moment I had where I had the players on one side and the villains on the other, and there was no way for them to really cross the gap. I thought, oh, it'll be interesting. I'll goad them into a fight. And if they fight him, they're going to get in trouble because he's really strong and he has a lot of strong allies. But they can just walk away and it won't be any problem at all. And they will have the Pyrrhic victory. So I had him bring down a prisoner, and then he starts tormenting this prisoner and threatening to kill this prisoner if they don't come and fight him. And I'm thinking, oh, they're going to be like, oh, I hate this guy, but we got to go through this portal. But no, they were like, let's fucking rumble. And I was like, okay. So they teleport through and start fighting this guy and have this knockdown, drag out fight. But then the character is like, listen, you and me fight just fists, no weapons. Because he knows the bad guy has a super powerful magic sword. So the bad guy's like, sure, sheathes the weapon, punches him, and then throws a smite on the punch. It does like 50 damage on the punch. Just like, wham. And so the player's like, I have done a terrible mistake because I'm going to die here. So then the whole party gets engaged, and there's this huge brawl. It's very back and forth. It's swinging both ways. The players are down to like 10 and 20 hit points at most. One of them has full hit points. The bad guy walks up, 2 attacks, kills them. Just takes them down to 0. Like, doesn't kill them outright, but takes them down to 0, unconscious, bleeding out. So one of them casts Fog Cloud, which blinds everybody, grabs up the unconscious person and jumps through the portal like, we gotta go. This is not going well. Which was really gratifying to me. I feel like when you have them cast Fog Cloud, you know you've done the combat right, because they have truly had to tap every resource if they're casting Fog Cloud. So yeah, make your enemy tough. And then later, my players will be at higher level, and they will be able to match this high-level foe. But right now, it presents, like, I mean, first of all, you had the one character who challenged him to a fist fight and got his ass whooped. And now he's feeling, like, salty, like, oh, man, I had this villain, and I failed. I couldn't beat him.
Oh,
and then you have
good.
The horrible shit that the villain did, and everybody else is like, man, this is a fucking bastard. We gotta kill this guy.
This guy's a dick.
Yeah, this guy is an asshole. We've got to take care of this. So, like, I feel like I totally succeeded in my plan, like, way beyond my wildest hopes. Like, they are so masterful. Invested in this guy.
Now, I think one thing I have to say, though, implicit in this is if you're a DM and you're still kind of getting under your legs, which is fantastic, because if my opinion is you should never wait until you feel like you're ready to DM.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll never do it.
But one thing, yeah, exactly. One thing to keep in mind is there is that mechanistic aspect of it where you're going to build a villain character and engage in combat with a team, understanding a little bit about the kind of damage that they can do. So like if you are going to build up to an introduction of a big villain, maybe have a few high CR encounters for that team and just sort of look at and maybe even track some of the damage that they can do per round and some of the ACs that they can hit just to get that sense.
Yeah, one thing that's important about what I did is the players had a teleportation circle to leave the combat at any time.
Yeah.
So, like, they had an escape route on this encounter that I knew was too much for them. So, like, if you throw an encounter that is too much for your players, expecting them to retreat, that's bad. Because a lot of times, they won't until it's too late. Because players, because typically when you
the last possible second,
until you enter an encounter in D&D, you expect to be able to win that encounter. That's sort of like the unspoken rule of D&D is that generally speaking, you have a chance of winning. You may get killed, but you have a chance of winning. But like if you design an encounter that you know your players don't have a chance of winning, first of all, you're going to be surprised more often than not because players are tougher than you ever think they are. And second of all, you have a very real chance of killing your party, and that's no fun for anybody. That doesn't set up a recurring villain. It sets up a new campaign.
So part of that is also, I think, to signal to your party if they're not getting it, it's probably worth throwing a few clues before you start taking players down outright.
I did one thing last night that does speak to that because I actually had a moment where they did like 3 rounds of spells on the bad guys and they were all feeling pretty good about their damage. And I was like, okay, one of them is bloodied now. And they were like, oh, fuck, what? Like, we just threw everything we had at these guys and one of them is bloodied, half health? No. So that was like a little clue, yeah.
Which is important because if you hadn't said that, they might not have, there's no way for them to perceive that. And they would just be like, oh, what the hell? Like we should have done way more, that we should have dropped more of that enemy party than we did, and they would start to feel like it was unfair because they never had that perspective.
Like if they invest heavily in the combat and they don't realize that the enemies are not taking a lot of damage, if you're not being descriptive or just giving them clues like, oh, this person's bloodied, then they might think they're winning. They might be like, oh yeah, we've done this much damage and, you know, these guys have all been hit. We got all our biggest spells off. Like, they got to be going down soon. So telling them, no, this one's just bloodied, that lets them know, oh, okay, this is how much we've done. We have to do that much again just to get one down. This might be untenable. It was really
Jay,
good.
we recently created a villain together.
This is true. We had the situation with your character coming in to the campaign.
When Pyra was meant to be a fill-in for someone who was not able to make one of the sessions. And I thought, you know, why not go for a pun? So she was a Marine. She was a Triton, or she was a Sea Elf fighter. Mm-hmm. And surprise, surprise, the daughter of the villain.
Yes.
That the party was hunting. And, you know, she also had reasons to try to find this individual, you know, unfinished business, all that sort of juice. And come to the end of the day, she...
Bad guys defeated and the MacGuffin is sitting there ready to go.
Yeah, so she wanted to retrieve the MacGuffin and instead got blasted far away, sending the other party members even further away. Were you intending to make her a villain?
So it was never my intent. It was my intention to teleport the players far away, but it was never my intention to make her a villain. So that came down to that decision in the moment when you grabbed the skull, because I had already set up previously that the father had, like, after interacting with the skull, had become, like, corrupted, and so we already knew it had a corrupting influence. But then when you, like, grabbed onto it, it felt like a significant moment. So I was like, okay, let's give this a roll. So I was like, make a wisdom saving throw. And I set a little DC in my head of, like, around what was reasonable. Yeah. But your roll was pretty low.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, okay, then the skull has corrupted this character. And everybody's like, wait, what? And then they all get teleported because there was this portal that had been used by the villain to try and send undead up to the surface. And so the portal went unstable with the villain dead and just blasted out, and they all got teleported all random places just because I had them leave their base of operations, and I didn't want them to get right back to their base of operations. It felt kind of weird to, like, go for a 2-day jaunt and then come back. So I felt like, oh, I'll make it a great adventure, like, having to get all the way back to their base from a faraway place. But then, like, it had this totally second ramification of, like, creating a villain who I can now bring back in any of my games at any time and have this whole story for them now, because they've got this whole mythology built up because of what Jerika already wrote and made up, and then what we actually played out and what happened in the campaign. It's like I've got this perfect, fully fleshed out villain ready for any time.
Now I've come to believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that your Saturday game is in the vicinity.
Yes, so the Saturday game is in the vicinity, but I think they're about to leave. So
gotcha.
My window of opportunity has missed there. But the thing
She'll be there waiting.
Well, the thing is that this character is this character is literally capable of living in the ocean.
Yes.
So,
true.
like,
and
they
walking
can
in
just
the ocean, moving.
Yeah, they can be anywhere.
True.
This character can crop up anywhere. Riding a giant sandworm, a giant undead sandworm. It'll be great.
Plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Really dune on this place.
Yes.
Can I give? So I've been thinking while you've been talking. Can I give my top 5 tips for memorable villainry?
Sure.
Yes.
Excellent. That is my ideal scenario. All right, my top 5 tips for creating a lasting villains. 1, give them a memorable voice, or if you don't want to do voices, kind of an affectation. that would perhaps turn up if you found it in writing, or perhaps would turn up if your party wasn't able to see but could hear the villain acting.
I love that because of the Adventure Zone. The drow. Oh boy, the spider.
Oh darling, the situation is this situation is getting quite uncontrollable.
Anyway,
it's classic.
Okay. Number 2, give them more important shit to do than be a villain to your party.
That's true, yeah.
Like, they need to have like a meta narrative of their own, and their goals should be bigger than your PC's piddling interests.
so how would you fix Rita Repulsa?
Rita Repulsa wants to conquer Earth. Not to defeat the Power Rangers.
She seemed a little focused on one specific area.
Yeah, that's true.
I would agree. I think she kind of changed courses midstream.
Due to budget constraints, conquering Earth has to pass through Bayside High over here.
Okay, so number 3. Try as best you can to balance them relative to your party's level, capabilities, stats. Kind of like we mentioned before, you can decide how overpowered or matched and at what time your villain should be. 4, give them reach and allies. So they should be, if they're a singular villain, they should still have connections and a broader reach than your party does. That creates a sort of sense of unexpectedness of how that villain could react, because you don't know the full extent of their resources. And 5 in my top 5.
To make it personal for your players. Like, there's nothing worse than a villain showing up and the players being like, who the fuck is this? Why do we care? Oh, this is that guy from 6 sessions ago? What the fuck do I care about this guy?
Right. I guess we should fight them now.
By having the villain, like, kill that person in front of the party after humiliating them. By having the guy agree to a fist fight with the fighter and beat his ass. Like, now it's personal. They will come back with, like, a vengeance. And next time it'll feel really good if they get to kill that prince. Like, make it personal, you know, give your players something to invest in. Like, yeah, the villain should have their own thing going on, but it should still, like, the players should still be something that the villain gives a shit about, and the players should give a shit about the villain.
Yeah, I remembered it. My last one. The last thought I have on it is protect their backstory, and protect their motives, and protect their kind of raison d'etre. Like, don't divulge that too fast, because the thrill is gone after you know what makes a villain tick to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also something to be said for a very simple motivation. Like, the reason I like Luca Blight so much is that he's just a monster. And the reason I've created this villain for my players is, I mean, he is basically just the prince of the foreign nation. There's nothing, like, especially deep about the situation. It's very simple. The heroes are trying to take land that the bad guys want, and the bad guys are willing to kill to get it. And it's very straightforward, but this guy is a fucking monster, and he's just an asshole. And so it makes it very like, the bastard must pay. We must deal with this guy because he's so bad. And he's just like, we can't let this guy become a king in a country. Like, what's going to happen to the world?
So that's fair. That's fair. Like, you can have good villains on either end of that spectrum.
But I do think you're right in so much as, like, if there's like a twist or a surprise in your game, you probably want to keep that close to the vest, because once it's out there, it's over and there's no real mystery left. You have to kind of create new things, and that can be sort of messy. So
it can also help the party predict what the villain would do. So I think a lack of predictability and a certain chaos force in a villain can sometimes help intensify the sense of, you know, oh crap, this person is a real threat, because we don't even know how they'd react or where they'd show up.
We don't know where they're going, what they're doing, or how to stop them, because we don't know what they're after.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm building a villain right now.
To what end?
I think it's gonna be for my homebrew. I think there's gonna be a dark druid surprise, who has some connections with the undead and has a swarm of dead roadkill that have been imbued with vengeful spirits that this villain has called forth.
Druids are great villains because they have so many forms of hit points, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's really hard to kill a druid, so they make it great villains. Like, you finally get the druid down to 10 HP and then it just wild shapes into a bird or something and flies off. It's like, well, fuck. Yeah. So druids
that would be a high level druid with a bird, but yeah.
Fair. I mean, if it's the villain, it's probably got to be high level because the PCs are numerous. So the villain just has level advantage. That's all yeah. Definitely with villains, don't be afraid to min-max because your players are 4 people versus your 1.
Yeah, and 4 brains versus your 1.
Yeah, that's true too. 4 sets of abilities. Yeah, it can be a mess. Good luck. Have fun. We look forward to your villainous stories here in the future.
Be as bad as you want to be.
Yeah, as long as you die in the end.
That's the only rule.
We'll talk about it.
If your villain is a really bad person and then they win, it doesn't feel good to anybody. It's like, oh no, we failed. And that person
it's
really
like that
sucked.
old saying, you either die a villain or live long enough to become the DM's favorite NPC.
Yeah. You live long enough to become a recurring character.
Yeah.
You get that season 3 character edition. Oh, Vegeta's part of the team now. All right, great. Didn't he try to kill a lot of people? It's fine. He's got a kid now.
Stop. You can't think half the episode's already over.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Insight Check. We would like to thank you. I would like to thank Embers. I would like to thank Jay. I would like to thank the Academy. I would like to thank my parents. I would like to thank my kitten.
It's my standing ovation.
Additionally, we would like to thank Amy T. Falcone for the faces that we use on social media for this podcast, and also to Vinsvept for Never Stand Alone, which is a track that can be found on places and things. You can always rate and review us on iTunes, and tell your friends.
And as always,
answering your cues from our collective is this
was
Insight
Check.
Eck?
No, the problem is you get to level 18 and then you are, you're right there on the threshold. You're 2 levels away from divinity, and I'm stalling for time because I don't have an end to this bit. That's the problem. I liked how I really buried myself in the middle of that bit and I had no escape route in sight.
And then I just swan dove into that grave.
Yeah.
Open
That's
grave.
the sign of a good comedy boy, is when you throw yourself at a joke with no hope of surviving it.